Andy, the Great Beyond. Hey everybody, the Cinema Buffs are back together again. We hope you had a great Thanksgiving. We hope that you have a safe and fun holiday weekend. And what better time to spend with the family than cozy up on the couch, watch something on Netflix.
Yeah.
So Nate and I just recently watched Jim and Andy, the Great Beyond, which is a documentary about Jim Carrey and kind of behind the scenes look when he was making Man on the Moon. But it also kind of goes into Andy Kaufman's career and Jim Carrey's career, kind of shows some parallels.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to rate and judge a documentary, so let's just split this up into likes and dislikes. Nate, tell me what you liked about this documentary.
There's actually a lot I liked about this documentary. I was really entertained, and I think it's because I really like Jim Carrey, and I was really interested in Jim Carrey. I think Andy Kaufman's very interesting as well, but
Yes.
I'm glad that this movie was paced well enough where we saw a little bit of what Jim Carrey went through with his career and Andy Kaufman. It wasn't just Andy Kaufman. I felt like they split it very evenly with this one.
Yeah, and that was a good way to keep the pacing in the movie going along. Because there were some times where I feel like they were just going a little too deep into a subject matter, but then they started to pick it up and switch things. And it was interesting to see the parallels between Jim Carrey and Andy Kaufman. Like, Jim Carrey commented that their early foundations of comedy when they were kids, long before they became famous, were similar.
Yeah.
And also kind of their career trajectory was a little bit similar as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that his career was very similar because he based it off of Andy Kaufman. He was such an influence. He really felt him. That was one thing. This is a very spiritual movie, and spiritual in the sense of Jim Carrey feeling very spiritual about Andy Kaufman, who he was, and really kind of feeling alone except for Andy Kaufman. He felt like no one really understood him except for Andy Kaufman.
Yeah. This movie is definitely a study of identity.
Yeah.
Because you find out that like Jim Carrey really started to lose his identity during making this movie. Like, he really embodied Andy Kaufman. One of the things about Andy Kaufman was that anytime cameras were rolling, there was reporters, something he was being recorded, a microphone, whatever, he was on. Like, he was on a show and he was portraying the Andy Kaufman that he wanted the world to see. And Jim Carrey kind of let this carry over onto set, but I feel like he almost terrorized the set with his attitude at times. I mean, there are times where they show Danny DeVito when Jim Carrey's on set and he's like, oh, he's being just like Andy. And he's laughing about it. Then there's times where it's just like, God, he's being just like Andy.
Just turn it off.
Right.
Like, that's one thing about the movie that I still think the whole movie was enjoyable, but there was times where you just kind of feel for the cast and crew where you're just like, would you just snap out of it a little bit so we all can make a movie here? Even the director's just like, I just want to talk to Jim. Can I just talk to Jim?
Milos Forman retroactively deserves an Oscar for this movie for putting up with Jim Carrey.
I can't believe the movie became so complete, and it is a great movie.
Oh yeah, I love Man on the Moon.
And I'm pretty surprised that it didn't just get botched and was like, forget it, we're not doing it anymore because of this. They didn't want to release this footage at all because the studio, Paramount, didn't want Jim Carrey to come across as an asshole, and that's exactly what he was.
Yeah, after watching this, I totally understand why they withheld all this footage for 20 years, because it does paint a negative light of Jim Carrey. It's kind of weird how a lot of people said Andy Kaufman would take his comedy, his whole shtick too far, being Andy, and then it's like Jim Carrey took it too far trying to be Andy,
Right, yeah.
So it's just like there's these, strange parallels between their two lives, and it was just kind of cool to see it be told.
It was really cool, and it also, when he was in these roles, when he plays not only Andy Kaufman, but his alter ego, I can't remember his name.
Everybody knows who it is.
Tony.
Tony Clifton.
Yeah, Tony Clifton. When he's playing him, and you really see these documentary video of him, like, Jim Carrey's not there anymore. Even, like, in everything. You can see that Jim Carrey is gone, and this is Andy and Tony, and that's it. And I really believed that watching this documentary. I believe that you sort of see the evolution of the production where the cast are calling him Jim, and he's like, you mean Andy? And they're like, yeah, Andy. And then,
where's Jim?
And then weeks pass, and they're like, that's what we have to do now. We just have to call this guy Andy because that's who he thinks he is.
He had even admitted that, like, he kind of lost who he was in this role. Like, when he came out of it, he didn't really know who Jim Carrey was anymore. He didn't know how to be Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting now when you look at his career. Because after I watched this, I look back at his filmography and like, what was the last movie that I thought Jim Carrey was hilarious in? Like, he really made me laugh. And it was the movie right after Man on the Moon. That's Me, Myself, and Irene.
Yeah.
I mean, he's great in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but that's not, not for his comedy. He's a good dramatic actor. And it's kind of weird, like, I think this experience kind of broke Jim Carrey as a comedian.
I think it did too. I think it broke him as a comedian and it changed him as a person. And I think that he really took on a new way of looking at life as more of a spiritual journey, as sort of almost like a nothing matters. We're all just here. We're all just
he's
existing.
floating through space.
We're
Is
just
how he
floating,
put it.
yeah. And there are times where he says some pretty crazy things where I'm sitting there and I'm engaged. I liked listening to Jim Carrey talk about what he believes and who he is, but there was tangents he would get on sometimes where I'm like, all right, like, I could see people being like, well, Jim Carrey's gone off the rails, that's it. He's making sense to me, but I could see people thinking that he's gotten a little kooky as he's gotten older. But I still respect the guy. I really like the direction he went.
I'm not saying he's making sense. He sounds crazy, but it's a bummer. Like,
Yeah.
Jim Carrey admits that he has no ambition anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, why watch another project with Jim Carrey again? He has no ambition. He has no ambition to achieve anything as an actor. He said he has everything he ever could have wanted, and he was still unhappy.
Yeah.
So it's like, not only does that kind of deter you from watching anything with Jim Carrey again, it just like, I mean, that guy, you look at what he has, what he achieved, and he's still unhappy. Like, kind of makes you feel like, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of like the main theme of his philosophy, that we're all just floating through space, everything's random, nothing really matters. But like I said, I don't think he's crazy. I don't think his beliefs are out of whack or anything, but it's just kind of sad to see someone who's achieved so much success and is adored by millions of people be unhappy about it.
Just to go into one flaw, the ending didn't really like leave me with anything. Like, even his last final comments or anything, I was just sort of like, oh, okay, well, that's it, I guess, There's one weird comment he says, and then the credit starts rolling.
He did say at one point that you can fail at doing something you don't love, so you might as well do something you love. And I really like that quote, because that, gives me the feeling that even when you fail at doing something that you do love, you still succeed because you're doing something that you love.
Right. Yeah.
And so I thought that was very insightful, and it was motivational. But then the same coin, he's talking about he doesn't have any ambition to do anything anymore.
Buffs.
All right, Nate, we shared our thoughts on Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, the new Netflix documentary. But why don't you go ahead and put a score to it?
Sure, yeah, we were talking about how documentaries, they're a little harder to score. I think it's very opinion-based. It's really how it affects you personally.
How interested you are in the subject matter.
Yeah, exactly. But I felt like this was a very well-made documentary. I really liked watching Jim Carrey sit down as Jim Carrey and talk to me about how he feels. And that's what interested me the most about this movie. Plus, we love filmmaking, and this movie was a lot about filmmaking. So I'm going to give it a pretty high score. I really enjoyed this. I'm going to go 7.5 out of 10. I really liked this movie.
Yeah, I thought this was a very enjoyable documentary, and like you said, it's kind of difficult to judge a documentary. It's how interested you are, like how appealing the subject matter is, and whether or not it leaves you kind of changed or affected, or maybe changes your thinking. And this one kind of did. And I totally agree with you. It was good to see like Jim Carrey just be in front of the camera and talk and really start to reveal some things about himself that most people wouldn't.
Yeah.
But I'm right there with you. I'm going to give Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond, a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a very interesting documentary to check out. And if you're a Jim Carrey fan, Andy Kaufman fan, a fan of filmmaking, I think this is one you have to see.
Yeah, even if you're just the spiritual type, I would watch it as well. It's a lot of good insights.
Buffs.
So that's our review of Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond. Have you seen it? Are you planning on watching it? What did you think? Leave all your comments below. Also, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. We always appreciate all the support.
And with December rolling around next week, we're going to be bringing you reviews of Christmas movies. We're going to be bringing you reviews of movies we've never seen, classics that we love, some movies that are set at Christmas but are completely not about Christmas at all.
Yeah.
So we'll start next week with the one we've never seen, and Love Actually.
Never seen it.
Believe it or not, two men in their 30s never seen Love Actually. But we'll bring you that review next week. So until then, don't forget,
there's no place like the theater.